Nadia Sharma couldn't stop staring at the scales. They rippled across Ambassador Jalak's forearms like liquid metal, shifting from deep blue to turquoise as he gestured while speaking. The Vesperian's tall, slender form towered over the human delegation, his elongated neck supporting a face that was both alien and expressive. But it was those scales that kept drawing her attention, especially the way they seemed to pulse with inner light when he became animated. Ms. Sharma, your assessment of the botanical compatibility? Director Walsh's voice snapped Nadia back to reality. Yes, of course, she stammered, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. As the mission's lead botanist, she was supposed to be evaluating whether Earth plants could survive in Vesperian environments, not getting distracted by alien physiology. The preliminary analysis suggests several of our drought-resistant varieties would thrive in the northern hemisphere of Vespera, particularly in the regions with dual sun exposure. Jalak tilted his head, a gesture Nadia had learned indicated interest. Your plants require only light and water. No crystalline nutrients. His voice had a melodic quality, like someone speaking through gentle wind chimes. Most earth plants need additional nutrients, Nadia explained, grateful to be back on familiar territory. But they absorb them through their root systems from soil, not through crystalline structures. Fascinating, Jalak's scales shifted to a pale lavender, a color she hadn't seen before. Perhaps you would explain further. Our botanical exchange programs will require deeper understanding. Director Walsh nodded. Excellent idea. Ms. Sharma can provide a comprehensive briefing. Tomorrow, perhaps. I would prefer today, Jalak said, his inner eyelids blinking horizontally across golden irises. If the botanist is amenable. All eyes turned to Nadia. This wasn't part of the plan, she was supposed to have at least 2 more days to prepare her presentation. But refusing the ambassador's first direct request would hardly promote goodwill between their species. I'd be happy to, she said with more confidence than she felt. 3 hours later, Nadia found herself alone with Ambassador Jalak in the station's observation deck. She'd chosen this location for its large viewing window showcasing both Earth and Vespera, hoping the visual aid would help bridge their different understandings of ecosystems. Your world is predominantly blue, Jalak observed, standing close beside her. Ours appears amber from here. Different atmospheric composition, Nadia replied, acutely aware of his proximity. Up close, she could see that what she'd thought were solid scales were actually thousands of tiny crystalline structures, each catching light differently. The color reflects what gases filter the sunlight. Yes, he agreed, then added unexpectedly, you have been observing my dermal layer with great interest. Nadia froze. She'd been caught staring again. I apologize if that's offensive in your culture. I'm just curious, he finished for her, scales shifting to that same lavender hue. Not offensive. Understanding begins with observation. His directness was refreshing. They change color with your emotions. They respond to biological and emotional states, yes. Jalak extended his arm toward her. You may touch, if scientific curiosity compels you. Nadia hesitated only briefly before gently placing her fingertips on his forearm. The scales were warm and slightly yielding, like touching sun-heated glass with the faintest give. They're beautiful, she whispered, then quickly withdrew her hand, embarrassed by her candor. Jalak's scales rippled with a golden glow that spread from where she'd touched him. Your biological response is equally interesting, he noted. The blood vessels near your facial surface are dilating. We call that blushing, she admitted. It happens when we're embarrassed or other emotional states. You are embarrassed by finding another species aesthetically pleasing? Not exactly. Nadia turned toward the botanical samples she'd brought along, seeking safer conversational ground. Let me show you these seedlings. On Vespera, Jalak interrupted gently, directness is valued. Evasion suggests distrust. Nadia met his gaze. I'm not evading. I'm trying to remain professional. Ah. His scales pulsed with understanding. Professional. This concept where personal reactions must be suppressed for work purposes. We have something similar, though it applies only to ceremonial settings. Relieved, Nadia nodded. Yes, exactly. And since this is a diplomatic mission. But we are not diplomats, Jalak pointed out reasonably. You are a botanist. I am a cultural exchange ambassador. Our purpose is understanding, not negotiation. There was logic to his argument that Nadia couldn't refute. Fair enough. Yes, I find your species aesthetically pleasing. The way your scales shift and change is unlike anything on Earth. His pleased reaction was unmistakable, the scales across his neck and face rippled with swirls of gold and pink light. And I find human characteristics equally fascinating. The variety of your cellular pigmentation, the expressiveness of your faces. The way your eyes reflect light without generating their own. Something about the way he studied her made Nadia's pulse quicken. My eyes? Yes. Jalak leaned closer, his face now just inches from hers. They change shade with different light. Right now they appear deep brown, but earlier under the station's main lighting, they showed amber tones. That's just how light works on brown irises, Nadia explained, fighting the urge to step back. His closeness was disconcerting, but not unpleasant. Perhaps, he conceded, but the effect is quite. He paused, searching for the word, captivating. The charged moment was interrupted by Nadia's communication device chiming. She stepped back, checking the message. Director Walsh is requesting a preliminary report. Of course. Jalak straightened, his professional demeanor returning. We've discussed very little botany. We've discussed understanding, Nadia countered with newfound boldness. Isn't that what you said was our purpose? The scales along Jalak's jawline flickered with blue-green light. Indeed. You learn quickly, Nadia Sharma. Just Nadia is fine. Nadia, he repeated, the name sounding musical in his throat. And you may call me Jalak, without title. As they finally turned to the botanical samples, Nadia couldn't help but wonder what other colors his scales might display, and what emotions they might represent. The professional part of her insisted this curiosity was merely scientific interest. The rest of her knew better. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings and presentations. Nadia found herself increasingly paired with Jalak for various projects, partly because they worked well together, and partly because, as Director Walsh privately admitted, the ambassador had specifically requested her presence. He says you explain concepts clearly, Walsh told her after their third successful joint presentation. Though between us, I think he just appreciates your company. We understand each other, Nadia replied carefully. It wasn't a lie, but it didn't fully capture the growing connection she felt with the Vesperian. Every conversation revealed new common ground despite their obvious differences. They shared a deep appreciation for biological diversity, a dry sense of humor that transcended species, and a willingness to ask direct questions that others might avoid. On the 8th day of the mission, Jalak invited her to the Vesperian quarters for what he called a true cultural exchange. No officials, no reports, he explained as they walked through the station's curved corridors. Just two individuals sharing knowledge. The Vesperian section of the station had been modified for their comfort, higher ambient temperature, specialized lighting that emitted more ultraviolet, and subtle changes in atmospheric composition that made Nadia's breathing feel slightly thinner but not uncomfortable. Jalak's personal quarters were sparse by human standards but featured several crystalline formations that caught and refracted light in complex patterns. These remind me of home, he explained, gesturing to a particularly elaborate structure. They grow naturally on Vespera. The formations guide our architectural designs. They're stunning, Nadia said truthfully. Like living buildings. Exactly. Jalak's scales flickered with pleased purple tones. You understand. That is why, he stopped abruptly. Why what? Why I requested your continued presence in our discussions. He moved closer, his tall form graceful despite the lower gravity. You see connections others miss. Nadia felt the now familiar acceleration of her pulse. Is that the only reason? Jalak's scales rippled with colors she'd never seen before, deep violets edged with silver. No, he admitted. There is also the matter of my physiological response when you are present. Your scales. They change color when I'm around. More specifically, they resonate at frequencies not typically triggered by professional interactions. His golden eyes studied her reaction carefully. I believe you might experience something similar, given your elevated heart rate and dilated pupils whenever we are in proximity. Direct indeed. Nadia couldn't help but laugh. On Earth, we usually approach this topic with a bit more subtlety. Is subtlety more effective? Jalak asked, genuinely curious. Not particularly, she admitted. Just more traditional. Then perhaps, he suggested, the violet in his scales intensifying, we might establish our own traditions. Something that honors both our cultures while allowing for. He paused, searching for the right words, mutual exploration. As Nadia looked up at him, alien yet increasingly familiar, she realized they were already charting unknown territory. Whatever was growing between them didn't have precedent or protocol. And perhaps that was exactly what made it so compelling. I'd like that, she said simply. Jalak's scales pulsed with light so bright it nearly illuminated the room. Then we begin, he said, extending a three-fingered hand toward her, with the most basic exchange of all. Contact. When Nadia placed her hand in his, the warmth that spread through her had nothing to do with the elevated temperature of the Vesperian quarters, and everything to do with the exhilarating unknown that stretched before them. You've been spending a lot of time with the lizard, Technician Morales commented as she slid her tray across from Nadia in the station's mess hall. Vesperian, Nadia corrected automatically. And his name is Jalak. Morales raised an eyebrow. On a first-name basis with the aliens now, are we? It's called diplomacy, Nadia replied, stabbing at her synthesized salad with more force than necessary. We're here to build relationships. Relationships, huh? Morales grinned. Is that what they're calling it these days? Nadia felt heat rising to her cheeks. 2 weeks into the joint mission, the station's rumor mill had evidently noticed her frequent meetings with Jalak. What had begun as professional collaboration had evolved into daily, cultural exchanges that stretched long into the station's artificial night. You don't understand, Nadia said quietly. It's not like that. But wasn't it? Last night, Jalak had shown her holographic images of his homeworld, vast crystalline forests glittering under twin suns, and deep azure oceans where bioluminescent creatures created underwater light shows. His scales had pulsed with nostalgic gold and blue as he described the seasonal migration rituals of his people. When Nadia had impulsively reached out to touch his arm in response to a particularly moving story, his scales had flared with intense violet light beneath her fingertips. Sure, honey. Morales winked. Just be careful. Nobody knows how compatible we really are with these visitors. Biologically speaking. After finishing her meal in awkward silence, Nadia headed toward the hydroponics lab where several experimental Earth-Vesperian plant hybrids were developing under her supervision. To her surprise, Jalak was already there, his tall form bent gracefully over one of the seedling tanks. These are growing more rapidly than anticipated, he noted without looking up. The enzyme application was successful. How did you know it was me? Nadia asked, moving beside him. Your walking rhythm is distinctive. His scales rippled with amusement. And you use a particular fragrance in your hair that contains compounds not found in other humans' grooming products. You can smell my shampoo. Nadia laughed. That's a bit embarrassing. Why? Jalak turned, his golden eyes studying her curiously. Sensory awareness is valued among my people. Should I pretend not to notice? No, she admitted. But humans sometimes find it uncomfortable to realize how observable we are. Fascinating. His head tilted slightly. You wish to observe others but not be observed yourselves. Something like that. Nadia gestured toward the seedlings. Tell me what you've noticed about the hybrids. They worked side by side for over an hour, documenting the surprising growth patterns of plants that combined Earth's cellular structure with Vesperian crystalline nutrient pathways. Their hands occasionally brushed as they adjusted instruments or exchanged tools, each contact sending a now familiar warmth through Nadia's skin. I have been researching human customs, Jalak said suddenly as they were recording final measurements. Specifically, customs regarding personal relationships. Nadia nearly dropped her tablet. Oh. Yes. Your species has many complex rituals surrounding courtship and partnership formation. His scales shifted to a questioning blue-green pattern. One ritual involves sharing a meal with specific atmospheric conditions. Candlelight, I believe it's called. You're talking about a date, Nadia clarified, her heart suddenly racing. A romantic dinner date. Precisely. Jalak's scales pulsed with satisfaction. Would you find such an activity agreeable? I have secured permission to use the observation deck's private dining area this evening. The environmental controls can accommodate both our physiological needs. Nadia stared at him, momentarily speechless. Was the Vesperian ambassador asking her on a date? The rational part of her brain immediately listed all the reasons this was a terrible idea: professional boundaries, biological incompatibility, the temporary nature of their mission. But watching the hopeful flicker of gold and violet rippling across his scales, she found those reasons increasingly unpersuasive. I would find that very agreeable, she finally said. His scales instantly blazed with such vibrant colors that Nadia couldn't help but smile. Whatever else might lie between them, his joy was unmistakable, and contagious. Excellent. He straightened to his full height, nearly 7 feet tall. I shall make preparations. 1900 hours. Perfect, she agreed. Should I bring anything? Only yourself, Jalak replied, his voice softer than usual. And perhaps a willingness to teach me more about human customs. The observation deck's private dining area had been transformed. When Nadia arrived, 15 minutes late due to an unexpected wardrobe crisis, she found the lights dimmed and the large viewing window unshuttered, displaying a breathtaking vista of stars. In the center of the room, a small table was set with what appeared to be genuine candles. Where had he found those? And 2 place settings, one clearly human, one distinctly Vesperian with specialized utensils she didn't recognize. But it was Jalak himself who captured her attention. The ambassador had exchanged his usual formal attire for what she assumed was traditional Vesperian evening wear, a close-fitting garment that left his arms and neck exposed, highlighting the intricate patterns of his scales. As she entered, those scales shifted rapidly from nervous green to pleased violet. You altered your appearance, he observed, eyes taking in her simple black dress. Traditional human date attire, she explained. You look different as well. I researched appropriate customs. He gestured toward the table. Including these combustion lighting implements, which apparently create the correct ambience. They're perfect, Nadia assured him, charmed by his thoroughness. As they settled at the table, a station attendant briefly appeared with covered dishes, then discreetly withdrew. Jalak carefully removed the cover from Nadia's plate, revealing what appeared to be a beautifully prepared earth pasta dish. Carbonara, he announced proudly. The station's chef assured me this is a traditional human courtship meal. It looks amazing, Nadia said truthfully, touched by his attention to detail. What will you be eating? Jalak removed the cover from his own dish, revealing crystalline formations arranged in a pattern that reminded Nadia of coral. Mineral nutrient clusters, he explained. Though I have been experimenting with some of your softer foods as well. You can eat earth food. Some components, he clarified. My digestive system can process certain proteins and carbohydrates, though they provide minimal nutrition compared to my natural diet. As they began eating, Nadia found herself increasingly relaxed in his company. Their conversation flowed easily from work projects to personal histories. Jalak described growing up in a communal crystal spire dwelling where dozens of Vesperian families lived in harmonic proximity, while Nadia shared stories of her childhood in southern India, where her parents ran a small botanical research station specializing in endangered species preservation. Your dedication to understanding other lifeforms began early, Jalak observed, his scales pulsing with warm appreciation. I suppose it did, she agreed. Though I never imagined it would lead me to dinner with someone from another planet. Is that disappointing? His scales flickered with momentary uncertainty. Not at all, Nadia assured him quickly. Just unexpected. In the best possible way. As the meal concluded, Jalak rose and extended his hand toward her. There is another human romantic tradition I have researched. Would you care to dance? Nadia blinked in surprise. Here. Now. Is this not an appropriate moment? His scales shifted to a questioning pattern. It's perfect, she said, taking his offered hand. I'm just impressed by your research. Understanding brings connection, he replied simply. With a soft command to the room's interface, gentle music began playing. Jalak carefully placed one hand at Nadia's waist and held her other hand in his, mimicking the traditional human dancing posture with remarkable accuracy. I should warn you, Nadia said as they began to sway to the music, I'm not particularly skilled at this. Nor am I, Jalak admitted. This will be a learning experience for us both. Their initial movements were awkward, his naturally fluid grace contrasting with her tentative steps, their height difference requiring constant adjustments. But gradually, they found a rhythm that accommodated their differences. Nadia relaxed into his gentle guidance, surprised by how natural it felt to be held by someone so fundamentally different from herself. Your scales, she murmured, noticing a new pattern emerging along his neck and face. They're shifting to a color I haven't seen before. Are they? Jalak's voice held a note of embarrassment. That is, unusual. What does it mean? She asked, curious. He hesitated before answering. It indicates a deep resonance response. It is not common among my people unless there is potential for significant biological compatibility. Nadia nearly missed a step. Biological compatibility? You mean? Not in the human reproductive sense, he clarified quickly. Vesperians experience compatibility differently. It is more about energy resonance, vibrational harmony between beings. And you're experiencing that? With me? The concept was both strange and oddly moving. It appears so. His scales intensified to that same deep, incandescent blue. Does this disturb you? No, Nadia said truthfully. It's just unexpected. I wouldn't have thought a human and a Vesperian could be compatible in any biological sense. The universe is vast and full of unexpected harmonies, Jalak said softly. His hand tightened slightly around hers. May I show you something? A Vesperian custom? At her nod, he slowly raised his free hand to the side of her face, hovering just above her skin. This is how my people share significant emotional connections. May I? When Nadia nodded again, he gently pressed his palm against her cheek. Immediately, she felt a tingling warmth spread from the contact point. Where his scales touched her skin, a pleasant vibration seemed to pass between them, creating a sensation of connection unlike anything she'd experienced before. Oh, she breathed, instinctively leaning into his touch. That's... Yes, Jalak agreed, his scales now pulsing with rhythmic waves of blue and violet. Our energy fields are aligning. Most unusual between different species. The music continued playing, but they had stopped dancing, standing motionless as the unexpected connection flowed between them. Nadia raised her own hand to touch the scales along his jaw, feeling them warm and vibrate beneath her fingertips. Is this why you've been drawn to me? She asked quietly. Some kind of biological compatibility? Perhaps it contributed, Jalak acknowledged. But my interest began with your mind, your curiosity, your openness to difference, your insights about life's interconnections. His golden eyes held hers. The resonance merely confirms what I already suspected, you and I share something rare and valuable. The moment was interrupted by Nadia's communication device chiming loudly. She reluctantly stepped back, breaking their connection to check the message. Director Walsh has called an emergency meeting, she said, reading the alert. Something about unexpected test results from our hybrid plants. Jalak's scales immediately shifted to a concerned pattern. We should go. As they hurried toward the meeting room, still in their formal attire, Nadia realized they had crossed a threshold. Whatever was developing between them had moved beyond professional curiosity or even casual attraction. The biological resonance Jalak described raised questions she'd never considered, about compatibility, about connection, about the very nature of intimacy between different species. Nadia, Jalak said softly as they paused outside the meeting room door. Regardless of what happens next, I value what we shared tonight. She looked up at him, at the now familiar patterns of his scales and the genuine emotion in his alien eyes. So do I. As they entered the meeting room together, Nadia noticed the raised eyebrows and exchanged glances among her human colleagues. Their unusual relationship was clearly no longer secret, if it ever had been. What that might mean for their professional standing, the mission, or their future, she couldn't begin to guess. But watching Jalak's scales pulse with muted colors as he took his seat at the conference table, one thing was certain, their cultural exchange had become something far more significant than either of them had anticipated. And despite the complications it would inevitably bring, Nadia couldn't find it in herself to regret a single moment. The hybrid plants are exhibiting unprecedented cellular mutation. Director Walsh's face was grim as she gestured toward the holographic display. Growth rates have accelerated beyond all projections, and they're producing crystalline structures we hadn't anticipated. Nadia leaned forward, still in her formal dinner attire, studying the data with growing concern. These formations weren't present in my morning inspection. They appeared approximately 3 hours ago, one of the lab technicians reported. Around the same time we detected unusual energy fluctuations throughout the hydroponics lab. All eyes turned to Jalak, whose scales had taken on a muted gray pattern that Nadia hadn't seen before. Ambassador, Walsh said carefully, do you have any insight into these developments? Jalak's inner eyelids blinked slowly. I have observed similar growth patterns during Vespera's resonance season, when ambient energy fields intensify. He hesitated, scales flickering briefly. However, those conditions should not exist here on the station. Unless something, or someone, introduced those energy patterns, suggested Security Officer Takeda, his expression guarded. Our sensors detected unusual vibrational frequencies in the hydroponics lab earlier today. Nadia felt a cold rush of realization. She and Jalak had spent over an hour in the lab that afternoon, right before their dinner. During their work, they had touched several times, each contact producing that now familiar resonance between them. It's possible, Jalak acknowledged, his voice carefully neutral, that cross-species interaction may produce energy signatures that affect Vesperian biological material. Cross-species interaction. Walsh repeated, one eyebrow raised. Would you care to elaborate, Ambassador? Before Jalak could respond, Nadia intervened. Director, if I may, certain Vesperian energy fields might have interacted with the modified plant structures. It would be premature to draw conclusions without further study. Walsh's penetrating gaze moved between Nadia and Jalak, clearly noting their formal attire and the lingering tension in the air. I see. Then I suggest you both conduct that further study immediately. If these mutations continue at their current rate, we may need to implement containment protocols. 3 hours later, alone in the lab with Jalak, Nadia carefully extracted tissue samples from the rapidly evolving hybrid plants. The crystalline structures had continued to develop, creating intricate fractal patterns that seemed to pulse with a faint internal light. These look like miniature versions of the formations you showed me from Vespera, she observed. Yes, Jalak agreed, his scales still displaying that troubling gray pattern. They resemble juvenile crystal blooms. But these should not be possible in Earth plants. Unless. Nadia hesitated, then plunged ahead. Unless our resonance somehow affected them. The connection we experienced, could it have transferred some kind of energy signature to the plants? Jalak's scales rippled with confirmation. I believe so. When two Vesperians experience deep resonance, it creates an energy field that can influence living systems nearby. I did not anticipate this would occur between different species. So our connection is causing this mutation. Nadia gestured toward the plants, which were now gently pulsing with bioluminescent light. Not causing, Jalak corrected gently. Enabling. The potential existed within the hybrid plants. Our resonance simply provided the activation energy. He moved closer, his voice dropping. Nadia, this is unprecedented. If humans and Vesperians can create such biological resonance. He didn't need to finish the thought. The implications were staggering, not just for their botanical experiments, but for the future of human-Vesperian relations. We need to report this, she said reluctantly. Yes, he agreed, but first, we should understand exactly what is happening. His golden eyes held hers. Would you be willing to attempt a more controlled experiment? Nadia nodded, understanding immediately what he was suggesting. We should document the resonance effect directly. Jalak carefully positioned several scanning devices around them, then extended his hand toward Nadia. These will measure the energy fluctuations between us. When their hands met, the now familiar warmth spread through her instantly. But this time, watching the monitoring equipment, they could see visible evidence of what they were experiencing, waves of energy flowing between their bodies, creating patterns of light and vibration that extended several feet around them. Extraordinary, Jalak whispered, his scales blazing with that deep, incandescent blue. The resonance is stronger than before. Nadia found herself moving closer to him, drawn by the pleasant tingling sensation where their skin connected. What exactly does this mean? In Vesperian terms. Jalak's free hand moved to gently cup her face, intensifying the connection. Among my people, this level of resonance would indicate profound compatibility. The beginning of a bond that goes beyond mere physical attraction. A bond, Nadia repeated, leaning into his touch. Like marriage? More fundamental, he explained, his voice taking on a reverent quality. A harmony of energy patterns that persists even when physically separated. My people call it echoing souls. The lab's monitoring equipment suddenly emitted a series of urgent beeps. Without breaking their contact, Nadia glanced over to see the hybrid plants pulsing with intensified light, their crystalline structures growing visibly. We're affecting them even from here, she realized. Yes. Our resonance is amplifying the energy channels we inadvertently created within them. Jalak's expression was troubled. This connection between us may have more far-reaching consequences than either of us anticipated. The lab door slid open abruptly, revealing Director Walsh and Security Officer Takeda. Their expressions shifted from businesslike to shocked as they took in the scene, Nadia and Jalak standing intimately close, surrounded by visibly radiating energy patterns, with the hybrid plants pulsing in response. What exactly is going on here? Walsh demanded. Research, Nadia replied, reluctantly stepping back from Jalak. We're documenting the energy transfer that's affecting the plants. By conducting some kind of alien mating ritual in my lab. Walsh's voice was ice. It's not a mating ritual, Jalak explained evenly, though his scales betrayed embarrassment with flickers of orange. It's a resonance connection. We've discovered that when human and Vesperian energy fields align, they create patterns that can influence biological systems. Turn off whatever you're doing, Takeda ordered, moving toward the hybrid plants with a containment device. These readings are off the charts. As Nadia and Jalak moved fully apart, the visible energy field between them dissipated. The plants, however, continued to pulse with light. How long has this been going on? Walsh asked, her eyes narrowed. The resonance phenomenon. We first noticed it this evening, Nadia answered truthfully, though she omitted that they had been experiencing the connection for days without understanding its nature. "Ms. Sharma, you're relieved of duty pending investigation," Walsh stated flatly. "Ambassador Jalak, I'll be contacting the Vesperian delegation to request your replacement." "That's completely unnecessary," Nadia protested. "We've made a breakthrough in understanding cross-species biological interaction. A breakthrough that's potentially destabilizing our entire experimental ecosystem," Walsh countered. "Until we understand the full implications, I can't risk having you two in proximity to each other or the lab specimens." "Director," Jalak's voice was calm despite his agitated scale patterns, "separating us will not undo what has already begun. The resonance connection, once established, persists regardless of physical distance." Walsh's expression darkened. "Are you saying you've created some kind of permanent energy link between yourselves and possibly our experimental plans?" "Not intentionally," Nadia clarified quickly. "But yes, there appears to be an ongoing connection." "Perfect," Walsh muttered. "Just perfect. Officer Takeda, escort Ms. Sharma to her quarters. Ambassador Jalak, please return to the Vesperian section immediately. I need to brief both our leadership teams before this situation escalates further." As Takeda led her toward the door, Nadia looked back at Jalak. His scales had settled into a pattern of deep blue overlaid with pulses of what seemed like determination. "We'll find a way through this," she thought, hoping somehow he could sense her resolve through their newfound connection. The Vesperian's slight nod was the only answer she needed. The next 3 days passed in agonizing isolation. Confined to her quarters except for formal interviews with the station's Scientific Ethics Committee, Nadia had no direct contact with Jalak. Her attempts to access information about the hybrid plants were blocked, her communication privileges restricted to essential station personnel only. The resonance connection, however, remained. In quiet moments, especially at night, Nadia could feel a gentle warmth spreading through her, carrying impressions of blue-violet light and crystalline formations. Sometimes these sensations were accompanied by emotions that didn't feel entirely her own: concern, determination, and something deeper that made her heart race. On the 4th morning, her door chimed unexpectedly. When it slid open, she was surprised to see technical specialist Morales. "5 minutes," Morales said, slipping inside. "That's all the camera loop will give us." "What are you doing here?" Nadia asked, confused. "Delivering news." Morales pulled out a data pad. "The lab results are fascinating. Those plants you and your boyfriend energized? They're developing communication networks." "Communication networks?" "The crystalline structures are transmitting data between specimens. They're becoming a collective intelligence system." Morales's eyes gleamed with scientific excitement. "It's revolutionary." Walsh is trying to keep it quiet, but half the science team is already arguing these results should be published immediately. "And Jalak?" Nadia couldn't stop herself from asking. "Have you seen him?" "The Vesperians are refusing to replace him," Morales reported with a small smile. "Apparently, he's been giving them quite an earful about respecting natural resonance phenomena, as they call it. Their High Counselor arrived yesterday and has been in closed meetings with our leadership team." Hope flared in Nadia's chest. "So they're taking this seriously?" "Seriously enough that they're flying in specialists from Earth to study whatever it is you two created." Morales checked her watch. "Time's almost up. Just thought you should know, you might have accidentally revolutionized interspecies biology." After Morales left, Nadia sat on her bed, processing the information. The plants were developing a collective intelligence, an outcome no one had predicted but that aligned with what Jalak had described of Vesperian crystal formations. Somehow, their resonance had catalyzed an evolutionary leap. That evening, her door chimed again. This time, when it opened, Director Walsh stood there alongside a tall, distinguished Vesperian whose elaborate scale patterns marked him as a high-ranking official. "Ms. Sharma," Walsh said stiffly, "High Counselor Tezik requests your presence at an emergency summit regarding recent developments." Nadia rose quickly. Of course. As they walked through the station corridors, Walsh maintained a rigid silence, but the Vesperian High Counselor studied Nadia with undisguised interest. Ambassador Jalak has explained the resonance phenomenon most thoroughly, he finally said, his voice deeper and more resonant than Jalak's. It is most unusual to find such compatibility with another species. It was unexpected for both of us, Nadia replied carefully. Indeed. The High Counselor's scales rippled thoughtfully. Yet perhaps not entirely surprising. Life finds harmony in the most unexpected places. The conference room was already filled when they arrived, human scientists and officials on one side, Vesperian delegates on the other. And at the far end, standing beside a containment unit holding one of the hybrid plants, was Jalak. Their eyes met across the room, and Nadia felt an immediate surge of warmth through their connection. His scales blazed momentarily with intense blue light before he composed himself. Ms. Sharma, the station's Admiral Khatri began, we've asked you here because you are integral to understanding the phenomenon we're witnessing. Please, join us. As Nadia took the indicated seat, directly across from Jalak, Admiral Khatri continued. For those just joining us, the situation is this. The resonance energy between botanist Sharma and Ambassador Jalak has catalyzed an unexpected evolution in our experimental plants. They are developing a crystalline neural network consistent with early-stage sentience. Murmurs filled the room as holographic images displayed the plant's rapid development. Our preliminary assessment, added a human scientist Nadia didn't recognize, suggests this may represent an entirely new form of hybrid intelligence, one that incorporates both Earth's adaptive biological systems and Vesper's crystalline information networks. The implications are profound, High Counselor Tezek stated. This suggests a fundamental compatibility between our species that goes beyond mere diplomatic relations. However, Director Walsh interjected, this also raises serious ethical concerns about unregulated cross-species energy transfer. The resonance between Ms. Sharma and Ambassador Jalak has created something none of us fully understand or can control. Not control, perhaps, Jalak spoke for the first time, his voice steady. But nurture and study, certainly. What has emerged is not a threat but an opportunity, a bridge between our biological systems that could advance both our civilizations. A bridge that formed without proper protocols or oversight, Walsh countered. Some connections cannot be anticipated by protocols, High Counselor Tezek observed, his scales shifting to a color that commanded attention. They emerge organically when conditions are right. A tense silence fell over the room. Nadia could feel the weight of so many eyes on her, judging, speculating, analyzing. But the only gaze that truly mattered was Jalak's, steady and certain across the table. Taking a deep breath, she decided to speak. With respect to everyone here, what happened between Ambassador Jalak and myself wasn't planned or anticipated. But now that it's occurred, we have a responsibility to understand it fully. She gestured toward the pulsing plant. This hybrid intelligence represents something beautiful, proof that our species can create together in ways we never imagined possible. The resonance isn't something that can be undone, Jalak added, his scales pulsing in rhythm with Nadia's heartbeat. Nor should it be. It's a natural phenomenon that occurred because there is fundamental harmony between us. Admiral Khatri leaned forward. Are you suggesting we simply accept that two individuals have spontaneously created an energy bond that affects our scientific experiments? I'm suggesting, Nadia replied carefully, that we study this bond rather than fear it. If human and Vesperian energy fields can harmonize so completely, imagine what else might be possible between our species. There is wisdom in this perspective, High Counselor Tezek agreed. My delegation proposes establishing a formal research initiative, with appropriate safeguards, to explore the full potential of this resonance phenomenon. Gradually, the tension in the room began to ease as scientists on both sides became increasingly engaged in discussing research possibilities. Plans were proposed for controlled studies, specialized equipment, and new experimental protocols. Even Director Walsh reluctantly acknowledged the scientific value of what had been discovered. As the meeting stretched into its third hour, Nadia found her attention drifting. Across the table, Jalak's scales had taken on a pattern she recognized as weariness, though his posture remained formal and attentive. Soon, she projected through their connection, not knowing if such direct communication was possible but feeling compelled to try. His eyes met hers, and a wave of warmth flowed between them. Whether he had received her specific thought or simply sensed her feelings was impossible to tell, but his slight nod conveyed understanding. Finally, as agreements were reached and documents prepared, Admiral Khatri addressed them directly. Ambassador Jalak, Ms. Sharma, given your unique situation, you will both be central to this research initiative. The restrictions on your movements and interactions are hereby lifted, with the understanding that all resonance activities will be conducted under proper monitoring protocols. Thank you, Admiral, Jalak responded formally, though his scales betrayed his pleasure with flickers of gold. As the meeting dispersed, Nadia found herself momentarily alone with Jalak in the corridor outside, the first time they had been together without supervision since that night in the lab. Your colors have been muted, she observed quietly. Have they been treating you well? Well enough, he assured her, the blue returning to his scales as they spoke. Though separation has been difficult. I felt you, Nadia admitted. Through the resonance. Not words exactly, but impressions. Emotions. Yes. His scales rippled with pleasure. The connection persists across distance. It will continue to strengthen with proximity and time. And what does that mean for us? She asked, the question that had been burning in her mind for days finally finding voice. Where does this lead, Jalak? He considered her question carefully, scales shifting through thoughtful patterns. Among my people, such a bond would typically lead to formal life partnership. But we are not only of my people. We are creating something new, without precedent. Something beautiful, Nadia said softly, echoing her words from the meeting. Yes. Jalak's hand moved toward hers, pausing just before contact. May I? At her nod, their fingers intertwined. The resonance bloomed instantly between them, stronger than before, filling Nadia with a sense of homecoming so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Nearby, a small potted plant, a standard station decoration, not one of their hybrids, suddenly sprouted tiny crystalline formations along its stem. They both noticed simultaneously and exchanged a look that mingled amusement with wonder. It seems, Jalak observed, that we will need to be mindful of our surroundings. A small price to pay, Nadia replied, squeezing his hand gently. The crystalline formations on the plant caught the corridor's light, refracting it into tiny rainbows that danced across their joined hands. Around them, the station continued its endless orbit, human and Vesperian crew members passing by with curious glances at the unlikely pair. Above them, through the viewport, distant stars shimmered against the void, each one potentially harboring worlds and beings as yet undiscovered, connections not yet made. Nadia looked up at Jalak, at the beautiful alien patterns of his scales and the very human emotion in his eyes. Whatever lay ahead, scientific scrutiny, diplomatic complications, biological discoveries, they would face it together, their resonance a bridge between worlds that no one had imagined possible. As if reading her thoughts, Jalak raised their joined hands, pressing her palm against the scales over his heart. New traditions, he reminded her, echoing their conversation from what felt like a lifetime ago. New traditions, she agreed, feeling the vibration of his life force harmonizing with her own. For a future neither of our worlds could have predicted. Around them, unseen but undeniably present, the energy of their resonance rippled outward, touching the plants, the station, perhaps even the stars themselves with the simple yet revolutionary message that difference need not mean distance, that alien did not mean incompatible, and that love, in its infinite adaptability, would always find a way to bridge the gaps between worlds.